Shabbat Shalom. Welcome to another virtual session of Bagels, Love, and Torah with Rabbi Flip of Congregation Micah. So happy you could join us today. Got a couple of things we want to talk about. Big one right now is revolution. Korach, Parashat Korach is what we look at today. And it is not, he's not the first rebel in the Torah. He's not the most dangerous rebel in the Torah, nor is he even the only one to voice gripes in the Torah. But he is the one who receives perhaps the greatest degree of focus with regard to revolution. He's a Levite, cousin of Moses and Aaron. He and his cronies want to know why Moses has kept the good jobs, the spiritual and political leadership positions of the Israelites for themselves, rather than, sharing the responsibilities with the larger community. Korach's chutzpah is the word. In lodging his complaint, so exacerbates Moses that Moses finds himself provoked, we'll say, at least enough to enter a verbal quarrel with the insurgents. Moses proclaims, Rav lachem, like, you guys, it's enough, it's too much. This is followed by the question, Hama'at? Is it too little for you? So what are we to make of this language of contrasts? We might be tempted to attribute Moses' consternation to wounded ego. After all, it seems to be his leadership that is being called into question. But if we carefully analyze Moses' response, and Korach, especially his complaint, we can see why it disturbs Moses so much, and why he might choose to respond by using this verbal encounter. Korach asserts, all of the congregation is holy, each and every one of them. So Nechama Leibowitz, by way of introduction, a 20th century Israeli biblical scholar, she is not alone in suggesting that this statement lies at the heart of Korach's sin. All of the congregation is holy. Korach diminishes the importance of community and a common goal in placing emphasis on the desires and ambitions of individuals, each and every one of us. The Torah and really the Jewish tradition emphasizes Klal Yisrael, the community of Israel. Understanding that occasionally individual freedoms must be abrogated for the sake of the larger community. It's like wearing a mask. For Korach, the demands of participating in society are too great. In sparking such a pointless quarrel, he and his followers show themselves to be small-minded, petty, and that's not what's been happening in our country with regard to race. That's not petty. Which is why this revolution is put down. When we promote our own interests above the needs of others, our motives, like those of Korach, are subject to question by Jewish ethics. But when we unite for a greater good, we believe that sort of work is pleasing to God. And so as we continue in the 2020 pandemic era, and remain virtual for now, we turn to text. And we say by way of introduction, welcome again, and thank you for joining us as we look at Parashat Korach, a revolutionary, but apparently the wrong kind. We'll see what the sages say. We warm up with a small passage, a reading by Rabbi David Wolpe. What is so wrong with idolatry? He asks. Why are idols prohibited? Most think it's because God has no image, and therefore to fashion an image of God is sacrilege. But in his book, Seek My Face, Speak My Name, Arthur Green brings a beautiful teaching of Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel that explains idolatry differently. Idols are forbidden, says Heschel, because there exists an image of God. It's found in every human being. Therefore, there is only one medium in which one may fashion an image of God, and that is in the medium of one's life. The message of the Torah is to make oneself a worthy image of God and not to seek images of God in the idols that we create with our own hands. As images of God, we are given a sacred task to reflect that divine image in our daily lives. A mitzvah is a brushstroke. A well-lived life is a portrait composed of goodness and meaning. And given the great privilege of creating art from our lives, we are not permitted to worship that which we fashion with our own hands. We may worship only that which is reflected through a good life, the presence of God. So, another take on idolatry, and especially quite beautiful, the idea of our lives as pieces of art. How will we paint them? The second piece of brain candy, it's called You Shall Not Covet. It's often said that Judaism prescribes action, not emotion. To be sure, Jewish teaching does not reckon with the quality of our thoughts and the range of our emotional life. Nonetheless, there is truth to generality. We are a tradition exquisitely attuned to practice, to conduct, to law. Think of our most famous set of laws, the Ten Commandments. Clearly, they emphasize action. Yet suddenly at the end is the commandment, do not covet. We understand that coveting can be powerfully destructive. But is it possible not to want what another has? And even if it is possible, can the tradition legislate our feelings? Many explanations seek to unravel this conundrum. One of the most beautiful is the idea that all the previous commandments are intended to fulfill the last one. One who lives by God's word will feel successful and satisfied and will not covet. We do not seek when we are content. Perhaps when the Torah enjoins, you shall not covet, it's not a commandment, but a promise. All right, I think our brains are starting to warm up. Let's turn to Korach and see what he can teach us. I'm in Numbers, chapter 16, verse number 1. We're not going to get very far. Vayikach, Korach, ben Yitzhar, ben Kachat, ben Levi. It says here that Korach, I give his extended lineage, took. That's what Vayikach means, he took. And the rabbi of Prishka says that Korach failed because he took. He wanted to seize greatness and strength all on his own for himself, with his own hands. And this rabbi believes that greatness is only bestowed on a person by heaven. You can't go out and take it for yourself. I wonder if you think that's true. You're allowed to disagree. That's why there's a cacophony of voices. So in Ethics, Pirkei Avot, Ethics of Our Ancestors, of our fathers, in chapter 5, verse 20, it says, which controversy was in the name of heaven? The controversy between Hillel and Shammai, in which one was not in the name of heaven. The controversy of Korach and all of his company. That's what it says in the Talmud, essentially. So why does the verse not read the controversy between Korach and Moses? Right? Paralleling the controversy between Hillel and Shammai. That's what the Midrash Shmuel is asking. Because Moses was guided by honorable motivations. Only the intention of Korach and his company definitely were not, quote, in the name of heaven. And how do we know that the controversy of Korach was not in the name of heaven? because Korah's controversy was directed against his teacher, Moses. And it's written, "He who initiates a controversy against his teacher is regarded as if he has initiated a controversy against the holy presence itself." Obviously, then, Korah's controversy could not have been, quote, in the name of heaven. So let's just go a little further. And we'll read some commentary as well. It says that Korah took, along with Dathan and Abiram, sons of Eliab, and On, the son of Pelah, against descendants of Reuven, to rise up against Moses, together with 250 Israelites, chieftains of the community, chosen in the assembly, men of repute. They combined against Moses and Aaron, and said to them, "You have gone too far, for all the community are holy, all of them. Why does the Lord is in his midst? Why do you raise yourselves above the Lord's congregation?" So it's a powerful line. And the rabbi of Kotsk, Menachem Mendel Morgenstern, he writes, "It's interesting to note that those who engage in a controversy with righteous men will attribute to these men traits which are the very opposite of their true character." It was also thus true in the case of Moses, of whom the Torah states that he was very meek, above all the men that were on the face of the earth. His detractors, seeking to find fault with him, settled on arrogance, of all things, as the failing for which to attack their leader. So they just got it wrong, at least according to the rabbis. All right, just getting warmed up. We'll be right back. Let's delve a little deeper, shall we? Moses had enemies, just like the Israelite people had enemies. But even within their own camp, there were clearly people who were jealous of Moses' power and his friendship, closeness with God. And this week we are reading about Korah's attempted coup. Rabbi Yechmiel taught, notice how careful Torah is to tell us that the 250 who accompanied Korah and his friends were men of good repute. These are not evil conspirators, but lovers of Israel, men of God, who have faithfully led their people in the way of Moses. By all this buildup, to remind us that it doesn't take much to turn even good men to evil. Korah used their love of Israel against them. He manipulates them and their love, pretending to care for the community when only really caring for himself. Being righteous is no defense against the plans of skillful and wicked individuals. You can't rely only on your goodness. Seek to challenge even the best surrounding plan to see if it needs to come to a place of goodness and not a place of greed. So I've taught before of Pardes, the idea of paradise, and it being an acronym. This Hebrew word, which has an English word which has a Hebrew root, paradise, Pardes, meaning pashat or simple. So if we notice the genealogy in the beginning of chapter 16, the Torah gives us two types of genealogies, right? With Korah and his friends, it goes into a great deal naming their fathers. With the 250 elders just after, it tells us only that they are men of good repute. Korah came from good stock, and yet he did an evil thing. The others, whose names we do not know, were not evil men, but maybe good souls who were taken by Korah's credentials, son of a Levite. It doesn't matter who your parents were. What matters is what you do. What do you get caught up in essentially meaningless credentials? Does society force on and value what really matters, or do we lend credence to superficial things only? What about the many priests, ministers, rabbis, imams, gurus, religious folk who claim to have deep spiritual connection and yet who do so much harm to both individuals and to society? Are we blinded by their claims? Is there criteria to judge the claims of religious leaders? And should there be? And what should be those criteria? So, here we are given what's known as Pardes Remez, a clue that something else is going on, that we should delve a little deeper. So in the Hebrew, the verb took, that I mentioned at first, vayikach, refers to Korach, Dathan, and Abiram, which is to say, it's singular when it really should be in the plural if he had these people with him. Rabbi Tzvi Hirsch Kalekster says that this refers to the fact that each of them was using the opportunity to further his own ends and not to advance the standing of the community. Interesting take. They deceived the elders and others into thinking they were acting on behalf of the people when, in fact, they were working only for themselves. So, where do you see this happening in the world today? And where do so-called leaders exploit legitimate concerns for their own ends? What can be done? What can be done to not only expose but to address these kinds of actions? That's when I get into the pardes, the drash, the interpretive drash meaning. So Korach's claim that the entire people is holy is true. It is. But his common holiness is not the same as maybe the advanced level of holiness of individuals that can attain a certain level of kindness on their own and through their efforts. So Moses claims that while all people are holy, some people are holier than others. Is that true? And can some rise above the masses in their relationship with God? And does this make them better leaders? Does greater holiness lead to greater power or greater humility, or both? And finally, is there a sod, paradise? If we can get to paradise and find that secret meaning that God intends, imagine yourself for a moment in Moses' time. And Korach comes to you with his concern that Moses is misleading the people, denying their intrinsic holiness. Whose side would you be on? Why? And on what basis would you make your choice? And how does this offer you a guide in your own times and situations? I mean, in what way are you enticed by the Korachs of today? So, when we come back, I'm going to go a little deeper into the interpretive meanings, and we'll see what we find. Written by Rabbi Flip Rice, Congregation Micah, in June of 2014, for reformjudaism.org, 10 Minutes of Torah. Quote, all men are not created equal. No advance in wealth, no softening of manners, no reform or revolution has ever brought human equality a millimeter nearer. George Orwell. Stop listening to this. You rebel. No doubt you are someone who actually enjoys reading about Korach's revolt, which is found in our Torah portion this week. The rebellion ends in failure, but it is fundamentally quite painful to most Jews who read it, largely because it's complex, timeless, and timely. Jewish tradition trained us to sympathize with Moses and his supporters. For the rabbis of the Midrash, Korach represented all that was evil in the community, all that was wrong with human character. Still, it's difficult for anyone passionate about democracy not to be stirred by Korach's powerful message. It's almost as if our Jewish loyalties are pitted against our democratic allegiances. And for those of us who take both the Torah and the Declaration of Independence seriously, that conflict hurts. Let's review. Moses and Aaron had successfully led the tribes out of Egypt and out of slavery in Egypt, and through the threats of the wilderness, and they're now relatively safe and secure, comfortable. As the families of the Israelites are living out their lives wanting to arrive in the promised land, God continues to speak through Moses to the people. In the midst of this idyllic serenity in the hills outside the land of Israel, Korach rebels. Resenting having to follow Moses in all matters, Korach challenges him with these profound words: "You've gone too far. For all the community are holy, all of them, the Eternal is in their midst. Why do you raise yourselves above the Eternal's congregation?" Korach's defying words here strike at the heart of our democratic values, ones we cherish, ones cherished by many. And why should one person have access to power and wealth and prestige in a way that another person does not? Korach's challenge echoes the words of Thomas Jefferson, of Abraham Lincoln. But these sentiments are also found in the prophetic voices of our Torah. In fact, in every generation, there are leaders who have fought for the assertion that each person has intrinsic worth, that all people have equal value. And since few of us would challenge this claim, Korach's disobedience strikes a chord within us. What does equality really mean? Whatever Rabbi Yochanan had to eat, he would give the same to his slave, about whom he would quote the verse, "Did not the God that made me in the womb also make him? And did not the one that fashions us both in the womb?" It's from the Talmud, Ketubot. All people are equal in the eyes of God who created us, but that does not mean that we are all the same. To be equal in worth does not mean we all have the same God-given abilities. Korach's flaw was that he confused equal worth with equal skills. In this world, there are people with differing degrees of intelligence, of strength, of size, of health. Great athletes are unlike the rest of us, as are talented musicians. If you were to hear me lead the service, and many of you have, you would agree that there's a difference between my singing and that of Rabbi Lori or of Miss Lisa. Korach misunderstood equality and holiness. He was threatened by diversity. And Judaism is based precisely on the celebration of diversity, the importance of distinction. So one can certainly be different and still be equal. The rabbis offer another explanation for Moses' instruction. Do this. You, Korach, and all your band take fire pans, and tomorrow put fire in them and lay incense on them before the Eternal. And then the man whom the Eternal chooses, he shall be the Holy One. I'm looking in Numbers chapter 16 again, a few verses down, verses 6 to 7. So regarding the showdown of incense at 20 paces, the rabbis asked the following question. What did Moses have in mind in speaking thus? Right? He meant in the religions of idolaters, there are many false divinities, many evil rites, and many would-be priests. We, on the other hand, we have only God, one Torah, one law, one altar, and one high priest. Yet you, all 250 of you, are seeking the one high priesthood. It's from Bamidbar Rabbah. The goal for us as Jews and partners of Jews is to be, quote, a kingdom of priests and a holy nation, seen all over the text. Look at Exodus 19:6. By contributing our talents to the world, each of us is able to improve humanity by living the values and practices that make for a society of sacred learning, of divine service, deeds of love. Not all of us are cut out to be the leader. But as a people, we must remain distinct. Not better, not isolated, not different in a way because we're distinct. Just as we needed Moses to function as a leader as part of the people, distinct from them, so too do we need Jews and Judaism with its distinct role to play in the participatory drama of all of human life. So, my former rabbinic intern, someone who worked with us back when I was in Seattle, who now has a pulpit in Cincinnati, Ohio, Rabbi Miriam Turlinchamp, offers a Devar Acher coming from June, as I remind you, 2014. She writes, when Korach challenged Moses, he crossed the delicate balance between authority and freedom into chaos. Roles and rules, the Torah says, are the necessary partners to freedom, choice, and questioning. The holy world God put into place came with some basic rules. Martin Buber said that holiness can never be fully realized within history, and yet the people are to act as if it can be, or even as if it already has been realized. Buber suggested that holiness is not something inert, a piece of God that just sits in us like any other organ. Rather, holiness operates by the same motto as most of our bodies: use it or lose it. You use your holiness by acting upon it every day. With every question that leads you back to yourself and back to the Torah, your holiness grows. With every act of loving kindness, your holiness grows. With every conscious acknowledgement of how beautiful this world is and how thankful you are to be in it, your holiness grows. If Korach had held his tongue and just looked around him, he would have seen that there was not enough recognized holiness in the world to trust an entire community to go without rules and roles. Perhaps in a time slightly closer to a messianic vision of the world, Korach could ask his question again. And then we might look around and say, hey, Korach, you're right. All the community is holy. We should not raise ourselves above any other person because everyone has their own value and none is greater than any other. Then we will all join hands and walk side by side into a happier, healthier world. Until then, let us concentrate on taking one more step towards that luminous and holy future, by consciously making that divine spark in all of us a bit brighter. Yeah. Timeless and timely, the Torah, Parashat Korach. There's a rabbi I really like of a temple Micah in Washington, D.C. His name's Rabbi Danny Zemmel, and he wrote this quite a few years back about Korach. He calls it Rebel Without a Cause. A friend of mine once made the observation that America is a culture in which a person might scrawl graffiti on a wall that says, challenge authority, and then another person will come by and cross it out. I love the irony of that observation, and I've always thought that it also applies to Jewish culture. Are we not the original authority challengers? I mean, Abraham smashed his father's idols. Nathan pointed his finger at King David. Elijah thundered, would you murder and take possession? We approve of those who stand up to authority, but only to a point. Korach presents us with an exception. He is the rebel who challenges authority but is still rejected by the Torah. The question is why? Is Korach a rebel with a cause? Or is he a rebel without a cause? For us, Korach is the personification of the rebel who has no cause. Pirkei Avot explicitly notes, which controversy is not pursued for heavenly purpose? That is the controversy of Korach and his band. According to this interpretation, it seems that Korach is out only for himself, his own advancement, and has no loftier reason for challenging authority. Korach is the proverbial troublemaker. In this concept of rising yourselves above the congregation, he continues, Korach considers the Israelites to be a community of individuals, not a collective unit. And he's a model of destructive voice, challenging authority for no purpose other than his own personal advancement, wanton destructiveness. Why then is the story even in the Torah, he asks. What did our ancestors want us to learn from it? Well, we learn from negative models as well as positive ones. But maybe there's something more here. As noted above, there's something of a countercultural challenging spirit in Judaism. There is perhaps something in each of us that urges us to rock the establishment, shake the status quo, and rebel. This parasha offers us guidance about what kind of rebels we should be. It teaches us that if we don't have a higher sustaining cause, challenging authority is simply spreading graffiti, destroying without creating. Devar Acher. Another word, an additional word about it. Whenever I read the Korach story, I'm always compelled to compare it with the story of the golden calf. In the Korach story, Moses' leadership is challenged by a usurper. In the story of the golden calf, it's God who's challenged by an idol. In the Korach story, when Moses is challenged, God opens up the earth, swallowing the rebels and killing them. In the golden calf story, Moses comes to the defense of God, killing the offenders. In both stories, it's Moses who stands between God and the destruction of all of Israel. I mean, if you want to take a look, we're looking at Numbers 16:31 and Exodus 32:10. These two stories are, in a sense, flip sides of the same coin. For me, they serve to underscore the intensity and closeness of the relationship that Moses and God share. They're dependent on each other. They are apart from all others. In a real sense, the Israelites are witness to a relationship that is beyond the covenant between God and all Israel. When the Torah ends with the words describing the uniqueness of Moses, who had known God, quote, face to face, that's Deuteronomy 34:10. It is the moments such as the Korach story that are echoed. So, Cantor Yossi Wolf offers a Devar Acher to Rabbi Zemel, writing, the two things that caught my attention as I was reading this week's Torah portion, Parashat Korach, are the first, that concerns the fate of the progeny of Korach. Right, in Numbers 16:32, we read that all the earth, 16:32, all the earth opened its mouth and wide and swallowed them up and their households, but Korach's people and all their possessions. So this person writes, because I'm a cantor, I immediately thought of the Psalms text, such as a song and psalm of the sons of Korach. It's Psalm 48. In total, 11 psalms are dedicated to the sons of Korach. What exactly happened to them? Tradition says that they repented, that they were spared, and became the choristers or choirsters of the temple and the progenitors of Samuel. That's from Numbers Rabbah. Later, a place was set aside for them in the netherworld where they sit and sing praises to God. From the Talmud, Sanhedrin, page 110a. During the rabbinic period, requirements for the chazan, the prayer leader, the singer, were extremely rigorous. Some sources state that not only the person himself had to be absolutely pure and without sins, his ancestors had to be the same way. Could the Levite choir singers, whose voices praise God in song, indeed be the descendants of Judaism's worst biblical rebel, Korach? And what does this teach us about the power of repentance? The second thing that came to mind occurs later in the portion, in Numbers, chapter 17, verses 21 through 26. Moses puts 12 staffs, each with the names of one of the 12 tribes inscribed on it, in the tent of the pact. And the next day Moses entered the tent of the pact, and the staff of Aaron to the house of Levi had sprouted. It had brought forth sprouts, produced blossoms, and borne almonds. A seemingly dead piece of wood had come to life, the antithesis of the death and destruction that happened to Korach and his fellow rebels. So Rabbi Lawrence Hoffman talks about the symbolism of the staff. He compares it to a conductor's baton or a magician's staff. But these tools produce beautiful music or magic only in the hands of the right user and in the right context. When Moses uses his staff the way God tells him to do it, everything's fine. But when Moses hits the rock, that is an unauthorized act by God, right? So Moses has to pay the consequences later on. Aaron's staff is only able to blossom when it's deposited in the sacred space where God's presence dwells. If we see the staff as a symbol of authority and or identity, we can easily apply it to our own circumstances. For some of us, our staff is our voice. For others, it's our gavel or our own pen. What does that teach us about using our staffs? How can we make sure that we use our talents and gifts properly and not abuse them? What does this tell our leaders and our teachers about the use of authority? May it be God's will that we make sure we use our staffs in the right way and in the right context so that they will sprout, blossom, and ultimately bear fruits and produce sacred music. A few scholars, drashing on the parashah, the portion of the week, maybe one or two more when we return, and we'll conclude with Haftarah soon. Thank you. So a short text on 16:4. This is again in the exchange between Korach and Moses, where Moses hears the news and he falls on his face. And there are a section of writings called Musarist writings, sort of ethical writings. And this one, on this verse, comments, on none of the other occasions when the children of Israel rebelled had Moses ever fallen on his face. Why did he do so at this time? Hearing the statement of Korach and his company that the entire congregation of Israel was holy and that every single Israelite was therefore holy in their own right, Moses immediately fell on his face in awe, for no one knew better than he how difficult it is to achieve holiness. Just sticking it in there because I thought it was cool. We'll conclude Parashat Korach with a little haftarah. The Torah portion deals, with Korach's attempt to replace Moses in the leadership of the people. And in the haftarah, the people try to displace God as their sovereign and want instead to have an earthly king. There are some other parallels. Both Moses and Samuel defend themselves by saying that they have not taken for themselves a single donkey that did not belong to them. And miracles occur in both tales to justify the status of the prophets. There's also a significant difference. Moses appeals to God while Samuel appeals to the people. For background, you should know Samuel was the last and greatest hero of the tumultuous pre-monarchical period in Israel's history. That's the second part of the 11th century before the Common Era. Served as a military leader, a judge, and a prophet. He laid the foundation for uniting the 12 tribes into a religious nation. He appointed Saul to be Israel's first king, and the book in chapters 9, 10, and 11 tell of 3 separate ceremonies devoted to this purpose. The last of these is told in our Haftarah. So I'm going to bless and then be reading from Samuel, 1 Samuel, chapter 11, and that goes all the way from verse 14 to chapter 12, verse 22. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar b'nviim tovim v'ratzav v'divreihem hane'emarim be'emet Baruch atah Adonai habocher b'torah u'Moshe avdoho u'Yisrael amoho u'v'nviei ha'emet v'tzedek. Samuel said to the people, "Let us all go up to Gilgal and there renew the kingship." So all the people went up to Gilgal, and there at Gilgal before the Eternal they crowned Saul king. Then they offered up peace offerings to God, and along with Saul they all held a great celebration. And then Samuel said to all Israel, "I've listened to your pleas and done everything you've asked of me, and set a king over you. From now on the king will be your leader. As for me, I am old and gray. My sons are grown. They're among you, and I have been your leader since my youth. Here I am, testify against me in the presence of the Eternal, in the presence of God's anointed king. Have I taken anyone's ox? Anyone's donkey? Have I maltreated or oppressed anyone? Have I taken a bribe to turn a blind eye to anyone? Tell me, and I'll return it." They answered, "You have not maltreated or oppressed us. You have taken nothing from anyone." He said to them, "Then the Eternal is witness, and God's anointed king is witness this day, that you have found nothing sticking to my hand." And they answered, "Witness." And Samuel said to the people, "The Eternal is witness. The one who chose Moses and Aaron, and the one who brought our ancestors out of Egypt. Now stand here, and in the presence of the Eternal I will put the case to you concerning all the victorious acts that the Eternal has done for you and your ancestors. When Jacob and his family came to Egypt, the Egyptians oppressed them, and your ancestors cried out for help to the Eternal, who sent Moses and Aaron, who brought them out of Egypt and settled them in this place. But they forgot the Eternal their God, who then gave them into the land of Caesarea, Hazor's commanding general, into the hands of the Philistines and into the hand of the king of Moab, and they had to fight them. They cried out to the Eternal, saying, "We did wrong by turning away from the Eternal and serving the Baals and Ashtoreths. Save us now from our enemies, and we will serve you." Then the Eternal sent Jerubbaal, Bedan, and Jephthah, and Samuel, and saved you from the enemies around you. and you lived in safety. But when you saw Nahash, king of the Amorites, marching against you, you said to me, no, we must have a king to rule us, though the eternal your God is true king. Now then, there is a king you choose, whom you requested. Now the eternal has given you a king. If you revere, serve, and listen to God, and do not rebel against the word of the eternal, then you and your king will be followers of the eternal your God, and all will be well. But if you do not listen to the voice of the eternal, but rebel against the word of the eternal, then the hand of the eternal will be against you and against your kings. Now stand here and see the great thing that the eternal is going to do before your very eyes. This is the time of the wheat harvest, is it not? I'm going to call to the eternal who will send thunder and rain, and this will show you what a wrong you have done in the eyes of the eternal by asking for a king. So Samuel called to the eternal who sent thunder and rain that very day, and then the people were greatly in fear of the eternal and of Samuel. The people all said to Samuel, pray for us to the eternal your God, so that we do not die. For we have added to all of our other sins a new evil by asking for a king. But Samuel said to the people, do not be afraid. It's true that you've done all this evil. Just do not turn away from the eternal your God, but serve the eternal with all your heart. Do not turn to know things that can't help you and can't save you, because they are nothing. Because the eternal will never give you up for the sake of the eternal's great name, for the eternal has willed it to make you God's own people. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam tzur kol haolamim sadik b'kol hadorot ha'el hane'emahan ha'omer ve'oseh ha'medaber u'mekayem shechol devarahav emet v'tzedek al haTorah ve'al ha'avodah ve'al hanevim ve'al yom ha'shabbat hazeh shenatata lanu Adonai Eloheinu likdusha v'limnucha lechavod u'tuvaret al hakol Adonai Eloheinu anachnu modim lach u'mivrachim otach yiparach shimcha b'fi kol chai tamid le'olam ba'ed baruch atah Adonai mekadesh ha'shabbat. So, wishing you from my heart and the heart of all of us at Micah a restful day, a peaceful Sabbath, and that you feel well. All right, take care. Shabbat shalom.